everyone, welcome back for our latest instalment of The Doctor Will See You Now. If you have been watching previously, I do hope you're enjoying the selection of author that Newcastle Noir is bringing to you via this YouTube channel. If it's your first time joining us, it's lovely to have you with us. And for myself, well, you know, there's always something special about the person who sits on the opposite side of the screen. There's always something there that makes me go, oh. And the fact is that this author, I've been able to work with them on a most amazing crime fiction festival before I got to know their writing. And you know that thing where it goes, I knew you were good, but oh my goodness, this is what you're capable of. So please, if you will, welcome Louise Mumford into the consultation room. Hi, Louise, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Jackie. That's brilliant, and I'm honoured to be here, frankly.
Do you know, it is absolutely wonderful. Last year, we were able to have Alice Hawkins on the show, and I still think she's the author with the greatest number of views.
Oh.
So yeah, Alice Hawkins magic. But the reason why I mention her is that idea of Welsh crime fiction, or crime fiction written in Wales. And you know, we might be familiar with the TV series that have been on, those crime dramas that have been excellent. But I think it's that idea of having, you know, maybe having caught that on the screen, that people need to be catching the writing that is coming out. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I'm desperate to talk about Welsh crime fiction and what we've got planned.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But we are here today to celebrate your second novel, The Safe House. Your first was Insomnia, and that was published in 2020. And Safe House it was published last month, I think it came out, because we've just gone into June. Yes. In at the moment of recording this. So many congratulations on 2 books. I wonder if you could set us off by telling us what led you to be the author of 2 novels. And I did read as well that you have been an English teacher in secondary school. And when was the moment where you could, shall we say, shake off the shackles and devote yourself to your writing, if that's what's happening? So please tell us all.
Yes, so you are completely correct. I was a teacher for 15 years. So I taught 11 to 16-year-olds, which is a brilliant job, actually, because teenagers are clumsy and hormonal, but they're also incredibly funny and warm and generous and enthusiastic. So I had a really good time teaching. However, at the same time, my first book, Sleepless, was based on my own experiences of insomnia. So at the same time, I was also struggling a bit with keeping to the world is designed around early birds. So if you're an early bird, everybody always thinks that you're more productive, that you work harder than people who are night owls. And that's not necessarily the case, because my husband's an early bird. So he's up at like 6 o'clock in the morning. He's in bed by 9. I'm still working.
Right.
At that point. And of course, teaching is an early bird job. You have to be in school in order to avoid the traffic and to get some work done before the day starts. The day starts as a teacher probably about 8:30 for most schools. You have to be in by about 7:30 just to get a head start on the day, and that's quite early. Especially as many teachers don't live close to their schools now. It's not the idea of being the local school teacher. So I was really struggling with coping with my insomnia and also teaching. And it was kind of getting to a head, especially when, and this is described in Sleepless as something that happens to my character. I had a car accident on my way home from one of the inset days, or the first days of the new term. And I remember thinking as I got in my car, oh, brilliant, you know, I can do this. I can not have much sleep. Look, I've just smashed that day. That's amazing. And instead of smashing the day, I smashed my car into the into the car in front, and the car behind me smashed into me. So it was quite a, my car was a total write-off. I remember looking around when I was in the ambulance, and there was a fire engine and another ambulance and a police car, and it was all for this accident. Nobody got hurt. Very, very lucky. Nobody was hurt at all. But without any sense of irony, it was a real wake-up call, because clearly I hadn't been concentrating, even though the car in front was also to blame for various reasons. I had also not been concentrating at that time. Not that I was looking at my phone or anything like that, but being tired is the worst thing that you can do behind the wheel. It's the worst way to drive. And so I thought to myself, well, I'm coming up to 40. At that point, I was going up to 40. good times. And I thought to myself, well, I've always wanted to write, and if I don't actually do what I've always wanted to do, then time ticks away very quickly. So I very lucky that I've got a business with my husband, so I could give myself, I was planning it as a kind of year's sabbatical to take a year. And I thought to myself, I was so confident, I thought to myself, yeah, take a year, write the book, get the book published in a year. That's doable. I can do that. Tick that off. Obviously it took much longer from that, but I gave myself, I thought, well, if it doesn't work out, I can probably go back to my school, because they really wanted me back anyway. They were really kind. So I did, and I wrote Sleepless then. So I gave up teaching in about 2018. Well, it was 2018, and I wrote Sleepless, and I probably finished a first draft of that by early 2019. And I remember thinking to myself, just how excited I was that I was writing this book, which the idea had come to me. It wasn't an idea I'd been thinking about for years and years. It was something fairly new, and it was just so lovely to be able to do what I always like doing. And that permission to give yourself, to permit yourself to do something which is seen as quite selfish sometimes, isn't it? It's like, oh, I'm going to go and sit in this room on my own, and I'm going to type for hours and hours. The rest of my family can't do it. And it seems really selfish, but I think you do have to be a little bit selfish in life if you want to try and achieve some of your aims and your goals. And you are as important as the rest of your family.
Yeah, I love what you say. I do think as well there's a good dollop of self-discipline in there as well, with that sense of, a room of one's own, a space of one's own, locking oneself away, and the need to tell a story. I think I need to apologize as well, because I think probably in introducing you, I think I probably called your first book Insomnia, which is, hey, it's a synonym of sleepless. It's
close enough. It's close enough.
Yeah, just showing you my my vocabulary prowess there. No, but yeah, and the other thing that struck me though in what you were sharing with us is it took a bit of a scare to put you on this path.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I would still be teaching now, possibly, if that car accident hadn't happened. It's really hard to give up, because I've always, before I met my husband, I spent quite a few years on my own, paying my own mortgage, my own bills. I've always been independent. I've come from a very matriarchal family where the women are the ones who sort stuff out and earn the wage and all of that. And giving up that independence almost, because even though I've got a business with my husband, it would be me giving up that wage that comes directly to me. And I know, again, it sounds really selfish, but as a woman, I found that really important to have that independence and to have that freedom to do what I wanted and to pay my own bills and pay my own way. So yeah, I could very well still be teaching now if that hadn't have happened.
So it happens, and Sleepless comes into being, which is great. But then there's the thing, is there not, of the second novel. And it's always seen as one of those challenges within the writing world, I think, regardless of genre, what comes next, because usually that first novel, there's been time to think about it, prepare it, and then the publishers say, well, we'll, 2-book deal or whatever, so next year, if you don't mind. There we go. How did you find that challenge?
I think in a way I was quite lucky, because I said that Sleepless was quite a new idea. So it wasn't a book that I'd been chewing over for years and years and years. I know a lot of writers have got kind of this one book that they're constantly working on for years and years. And then if that gets published, they feel that they need another 6, 7, 8 years to produce another book. Because I produced Sleepless quite quickly, I think that gave me a bit of confidence. Again, probably overconfidence. That's the theme for me. I think it's just being slightly overconfident in what I could do for book 2. And I did have an idea when I was writing Sleepless as to what another book could be. And it came from teaching a bit as well, because I don't know if you know a book which is called Z for Zachariah.
Yes.
And we used to teach it in my school. We taught it for years and years and years. And what I loved about Z for Zachariah was it was a really, not to diss the book, but it's a really boring look at the apocalypse. It's, you know, this horrible nuclear something, this unclear what has happened, and this valley is saved with this teenage girl in it, and it's all about her chores and surviving, and you know how she does meet this scientist and all that sort of stuff. But it was just about the kind of, you know, the apocalypse is not always interesting and exciting, and I wanted that kind of feel to what became the Safe House then. But I did find writing book 2 much tougher. I think I wrote about 20,000 words and then got rid of that because it was going off somewhere that was a little bit too sci-fi. I didn't want it to be very sci-fi. I wanted it to be as real as a book about 2 women in a bunker can be. I wanted it to be very real. And then I started again. I wrote the whole thing, but then I was writing it from Esther's point of view. So I was doing first person, and that was a brilliant way into her character, but it didn't work as the book for some reason. And I think it's just the way I write. I seem to write in close third in the easiest way. It just comes naturally. So when I rewrote it then in the close third, we wrote the whole thing again in the close third, I could also add in Hannah's bits as well, and actually look at Hannah in a bit more detail, and that's when the book kind of really came together. So it wasn't so much thinking up the idea for the second book, it was just nailing down exactly what form it should be.
And thank you, because you know, even just in explaining to us, you know, the process that the Safe House went through, you know, I do wonder, you know, for those of us that are watching, listening, the sense of I've been writing something and I just can't, I can't. Yeah. And you know, and as you said, just that shift of perspective gave it a very different feel, and meant you could bring different things in, and then it seemed to feel as if it worked, and it certainly does. From a reader's perspective, it certainly works. I'd just like to say, for people watching who haven't been there yet, of course you must go, but do read with the window open, because I mean, so beautifully written, Louise. There's a real lyricism in the way that you write, and the reality of the claustrophobia. Yeah. That you know, that of course, you know, is really one of the key elements, you know, especially that, you know, good way into the book. You really captured that, you know, and I love it when books produce that reaction. You know, there are some books I've read where it's been so gross, it's been like, I just need to go get a shower now, you know, and yours was, can I just get me excellent. But we'll get into some more detail about the book in a little while. But before we do, again, just a little bit of background. You know, those of us who are watching or listening, I know we probably really adore crime fiction and all the spectrum that's there. You chose psychological thrillers. Were you dead set on that from the beginning? Because you said you thought, oh, you know, I need to write, and then you got the chance. But was psychological thrillers where you wanted to go?
No, not at all. I always say this. I always thought so. As a reader, I love kind of magical realism, I think it's called. So it's like Neil Gaiman, there's like Erin Morgenstern, and it's Susanna Clarke, and it's not Terry Pratchett isn't magical realism, but I also love Terry Pratchett. So I always thought I would be writing a kind of Neverwhere kind of book, you know, like Neil Gaiman's one of his first books. And then I wrote Sleepless, and Sleepless couldn't be anything else but a thriller. Didn't necessarily have to be a psychological thriller. That was my publisher's decision as to where they market it, very cleverly, because it did very well as a psychological thriller, so that's fine. And again, with the safe house, once you're in a kind of genre, your publisher generally likes you to stick there for a little bit. You can branch out into other things, but I think you've got to kind of, it's a terrible phrase, isn't it? You've got to create your brand first of all.
Yeah, sadly yes. I mean, I think that is, again, it's always one of the things that I've pondered on for creatives, because, you know, when those juices start flowing, you to control them and say, you must turn out this way, you know, I will mold you to my will. And I sometimes wonder, you know, in that sacrifice, do we as readers, do we lose what might have been because of those constraints?
Yeah, I definitely think readers are a lot more open than publishers give them credit for. But on the other hand, publishers are always going to stick to what they know, because they've got overheads and they've got
all of
that sort of stuff. So I completely see it from their point of view as well. For me, I'm pretty lucky because my editor, we generally just make the genre fit my book. So we just say it's a psychological thriller and people start reading it, and then generally, you know, if they like it, they like it. If they don't, it's not generally because it's not a psychological thriller, it's because it just wasn't the story for them, which is fine. So I'm really lucky that my editor pretty much goes with whatever I suggest. I mean, with the third book now that I'm writing, that's not really, it's not really a psychological thriller either, but we'll market it as to whatever the market says it should be, and then I can just have fun within that genre. So I'm very lucky actually, because I get to write slightly off kilter books within a certain genre.
Yes, yeah, and I think again, you know, that sense of if you are looking for a book, sort of like to refresh, I think your work fits beautifully there, because there are so many strands to, you know, the different elements that you bring in. I mean, I did want to ask you, you know, there's aspects of this that are dystopian.
Yeah.
And did you purposefully set out to do that? Were there elements that you felt had to come into this? There's the eco side as well. You know, I mean, I just think it's so rich. You know, it's like one of those beautiful trifles. Yeah, really.
Free trifle, perhaps.
And yeah, you know, was it important for you for you know, those different elements? Why bring those in?
I think for Sleepless, once you start talking about sleep technology, which is a massive part of Sleepless, because it's this idea of this magic bullet that can solve your sleep issues. Once you get into the idea of sleep technology, it kind of has to get a bit dystopian, because we all know that technology companies are not working in our best interests. They do not have our best interests at heart. They often have profit and control as their interests. So that had to have a dystopian edge, because that's the way that life is for any sort of technology firm. Even the ones who say that they're very, you know, caring, and, you know, they have ping pong in their not ping, but badminton in their offices and grass on the walls and all of that sort of stuff. They're multinational corporations. So, they're not always good. For the safe house, I think it's more about Hannah's mindset, and I think Hannah, who's the mum, she's so obsessed with protecting Esther that everything becomes just the real world is dystopian to Hannah because everything is a threat. So it's actually more about how Hannah views the world than what the world actually is. And it's quite interesting then to contrast that with how when Esther gets into the world a little bit, how Esther views it, because she views it in a very kind of different, embracing, innocent, naive way, which was a joy to do in contrast to Hannah, who always sees the bad. And in a way, that little bit of how Hannah views the world is a little bit inspired by my mum, because my mum brought my sister and I up on our own. And as a single mum, you know, when things go wrong, you know, we'd have a leak or something, it would be the end of the world because my mother didn't know how to fix it herself. It meant money to call a plumber, which we often didn't have. So it was these little things became massive things, you know, massive problems, and that had to be got through. And that's, you know, what happens when you don't have much money and you're a single mum. You battle against life, and that's kind of what Hannah does as well.
But I just thought, as you were speaking, and it struck me again, as reader, you know, we believe the world that Hannah has created for Esther. I mean, that's, you know, you read and this is the world that as it is presented, and then
it's a magic eye thing almost. You can look at the world now and you can see all of the really good things. You can see all of the eco initiatives, and you can see, you know, how people are trying to change the world for the better, and you can see diversity, and you can see all of these things. But just shift your perspective and that magic eye picture changes and becomes really dark, because you see the pollution that's choking the seas, you see the radioactivity from, you know, nuclear reactors, you see war and famine and disease instead. So it is very much that magic eye version of the world. Which world do you choose to see?
And you provide us with those different perspectives, which was very exciting. Let's stick with the house for a moment, the safe house. I just wondered, I mean, you spoke a little bit about, you know, when you were growing up, did your mum ever have you in a bunker?
No, I'd like to make it clear, we grew up in a semi-detached in a suburb. We were fine. We were not in a bunker, not at all. My mother would like everybody to know that, and to make that very clear. I think growing up in the 80s with not much money in a small suburb outside of Cardiff does feel a little bit like you're growing up in a bunker, because in the 80s, no internet, so no contact with the world. The buses didn't run on a Sunday, so if it was a Sunday and you wanted to do anything, you had to go on the train, which you couldn't afford. So you just kind of wandered around. I grew up in a place called Caerphilly, so you kind of wandered around Caerphilly like a ghost. The idea of boredom is something that children nowadays don't have a lot anymore, because once they're finished doing their real world activities, they can do all this online stuff. Whereas when we were finished doing our real world activities, we had a book, or we could watch raindrops go down the window and watch them race each other down, which, you know, I spent quite a lot of time doing as a child, guessing which one would win on its way down the window. So I think, even though obviously I had a very normal childhood, I think that kind of idea of living in a bubble almost very much influenced Esther. And then it was great fun researching about bunkers, and it's a very American thing. So the idea of the doom boom, I mention it in the book. And it, of course, you know, business can make money out of anything. So of course they're going to make money out of the apocalypse. And they have, you know, made these, you can buy in America, these kind of oil tanker sized bunkers that you can drop into your back garden. You can dig a massive hole, drop the bunker in, and it's got a life larder and all of that sort of stuff. And you've got your little insurance clause in case the world all goes to hell. You can go into your oil tanker sized bunker in your back garden. I mean, that works because they've got more space in America. It's a bit harder than living in a tenement block to get your oil tanker sized bunker. But it's really interesting, and you've got differences. So you've got like the doomsday preppers, who are very much kind of very male as well, who are in the bunkers, and you've got your life larder and all of that sort of stuff. But then you've got people called homesteaders, who are much more what we would recognize as just off-grid and self-sufficient, so that if things went wrong, you know, they could live quite comfortably, you know, themselves. And often they're in communities as well, the homesteaders. They've got a little community, they've all chosen to live that way. I know far too much about growing plants in the dark. Hydroponics. I actually met the daughter of the gentleman who invented hydroponic farming through a book club thing that I did, and she actually said, oh, hang on, that's my dad invented how to do this. I was absolutely in awe. This man has, you know, clearly made such a contribution to the world with the ability to grow plants in this way. So when you grow them with LED lights, and you've got certain nutrients in water base, they're not in earth, they're in kind of water instead. You can grow all sorts of things then. So I did lose a lot of time researching all of that, but that was great fun. That's part of the fun of being a writer, is to find out this stuff.
Indeed, yeah. And again, you know, it's like all the avenues that you can go down. I thank you for the avenues that you went down, because whilst certain aspects to do with Hannah might be questionable, what I really did appreciate was this woman's resourcefulness.
Yeah. Yes. Well, again, I was kind of imagining the women that I've grew up around, you know, if they decided to take us and go and live in a bunker, they would jolly well work out how to do it properly. They'd do their homework, you know. You wouldn't just rock up to the bunker and expect it to work without doing any maintenance. And I also wanted to be very clear the amount of work it takes to have lived like that. You can't just play chess all day and expect the place to run around. It has to be maintained, it has to be checked, you have to have supplies and all that sort of stuff. And
there was, again, early in the book, and there's something that it smacks you from the page, as the idea of there is a routine, there is a daily routine, and say something like the keeping to that routine stopped you from gazing at the veins in your wrist. And it was like, oh, it's like I say, I think you write in such a powerful way that is really subtle. It's like, okay. But yeah, that sense of there being a routine, and you know, we come sort of like 16 years on since first. So this isn't something that Hannah has managed to do for a couple of years.
Yeah.
This is something that she's done for all this time, and that she's managed to, I want to use the word very carefully, I might say instruct Esther in how to do things as well, or not. And yeah, this just wasn't a thing that happened overnight. And so it made me think, you bring us the moment pretty soon on in the book where Hannah turns 21, Esther turns 21, and that sense of coming of age and starting to press for things that she would like and things that she wants to do. Why 21 and not 18?
I know. I was thinking back as to why I chose 21 and not 18. And I think it's possibly more to do with me than anything else. I think looking back at me at 18, I was still a kid. I was a kid, really. And maybe it's different for 18-year-olds like in this day and age, but I would have been 18 in 1998, just before the millennium. And yeah, I was a kid. I still wasn't really questioning much. You know, my mother's views were kind of my views. I still lived in Caerphilly at that point, you know. So I was thinking then by 21, when you've got to start thinking of, well, what do I actually want out of life now? I'm in my 20s. Suddenly that change from 1 to 2 to a new decade suddenly makes a huge difference, I think. I think it's the power, isn't it, that we have as a society have given to certain ages, like 18, 21. Why not 20? Why is it 21?
Yes,
Why is it not 20?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It's weird, the power that we give to them, but definitely that's what plays in Esther's mind. It's this idea that she's 21. This is kind of her last big birthday before maybe 30. You might get something at 30, I don't know. This is her chance, you know, to try and see a bit more of the outside world.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned all the research that you've done. I wonder, did you take the opportunity to live a little bit off grid as an adult, not as a child, of course? Did you wander off into the Welsh hills and?
Jackie, I hate camping. I hate being off grid. I detest it. I honestly detest it. We went camping, properly camping. I've done it once with my husband. It was by a trout lake. I would never do it again. It was cold. I don't sleep very well, so I was just awake in the cold, in the dark. I couldn't get past him to get out, and even if I got out, I couldn't.
Yeah, where are you going to go? What are you going to do?
Where am I going to go?
Yeah.
There was the sound of the trout. They would just kind of pop up in the middle of the night and then go back down again. So you would be frightened out of your life every half an hour, thinking that something was about to attack you. I hate it. I don't like being more than a few feet from an electrical plug point. Mostly for various reasons, my phone, hair straighteners, all of that. So I hate doing all of that kind of thing. But I think as a writer, it's quite good to write about those things, because it's, if you don't know about it, I don't know what it feels like to live off grid. You hopefully, as a writer, you're going to work really hard to make that seem as realistic as possible, because you know that you don't know what it's like. So somebody else who doesn't know what it's like, they've got to believe in it. They've got to believe that all of this really works. But no, I'm not an off-grid kind of person. My husband could be, definitely. He'd love to do all of that sort of stuff. But I've decided now, I'm in my 40s, it's hotel rooms and, spa breaks all the way.
And maybe a walk out into the...
Maybe a walk, but my husband just generally tends to read the map wrong. We end up in a farmer's field full of cows, or we've got to climb over a barbed wire fence or something, or we get lost and then it's another 2 hours to get back. We need to save our marriage at this point, I think.
It sounds like it. I think Hannah could help. I think she'd sort you out. She'd sort you out. Motherhood at the expense of everything else. And I know the other day you and I were talking over a different matter, but I feel so blessed at the minute. There's been a number of writers whose work, has been looking at this in various different ways, but and in particular mothers. Although I don't want to genderize this, because parents. But the three authors, you and these are the two, it's been via the mother's lens. Do you think if you'd written this father and son, could you have written it father and son, or would it just not have worked?
I did. Really interesting that you say that, because the 20,000 words that I binned, it was a father and a daughter. So it was a father and Esther. And the reason it wasn't working was because I just wasn't getting the father's character right. But weirdly, it's kind of some sort of subconscious kind of choice. I thought, well, somebody who goes and lives in a bunker, it's got to be a father, hasn't it? Why would it be? And then I thought, well, hang on, a woman, she doesn't need particularly any physical strength or anything to live in this place. Nothing that a woman couldn't do anyway. So why does it have to be a dad? And as soon as I switched it then to a mum and a daughter, it sprang to life. Possibly that's me not being able to write dads, because my father hasn't been a major part of my life, really. So maybe I just don't get it. I don't understand the relationship. Whereas I can you know, write about mums and daughters, or mothers and sons, in an easier way. I think it's quite nice to have a woman do all of this, you know, kind of dystopian and apocalyptic and all of these things. A lot of the recent ones that have come out, I'm thinking like Bethany Cliff's last one, At the Party, and stuff like that. A lot of these are becoming very female driven now, and I think there's a reason for this, because in cinema's view of the end of the world, up until very recently, it's often been quite a male end of the world. So I think it's time that women showed they could cope with disasters too, and cope with strange living conditions just as well as men could. And then as soon as you get a mum and a daughter, you've got all sorts of things. And I do think stereotypically a mother's love, isn't it, is seen as the fiercest kind of love. Whether that's right or not, it's probably not. I'm sure father's love is just as fierce. And as soon as you get into that, you've, of course, when something is so strong and when something is so fierce, it can actually turn and start to eat the person up and who they're trying to protect, just as much as protect them, I think.
That, you know, again, points in the novel, and it's like, no, stop it.
And also Hannah has trapped herself just as much as her daughter. That's the thing. She has created this prison for her daughter for very good reasons. They're you know, they're you know, very well thought out reasons, I guess. But she's also trapped herself. She can't leave. The world around her has changed so much in the 16 years that they've been very sheltered, that she has no way to navigate it.
Because of everything that is going on outside and how life changes. Now, talking of things changing, with the arrival of a certain person, are we allowed to name that person, or will it give too much away?
No, I think we can say Tom. Yeah.
Can we say Tom?
Anything away? Yeah.
And if you can tell us a little bit about this character and the creation of this character. When did you scope Tom to come in and make the changes that occur? How did you find him?
Like most of my characters, they just appear at the right time in generally the form that they end up in. It's weird. It's because I don't really plan, so I don't really know the kind of character that's going to turn up. And sometimes it takes a day or so to kind of get to grips with them. But he turned up pretty much fully formed. I'm not very good at writing stereotypical romantic leads. I'm never gonna be a Mills and Boone writer, even though they're brilliant. I love those books. I think those books are fantastic. And it's just I'm never gonna be able to write one, because I can't write that kind of. I can't even write an action hero-y kind of person, because I don't really know those people in my everyday life. I'm surrounded by geeks and nerds and computer, people who play on computer games and all that sort of stuff. So that kind of always bleeds into my male characters, I think. And they're always a little bit nerdy, and they're always the ones that are meant to be meant to be good, are funny and self-depreciating and all of that kind of thing. So yeah, Tom did appear fully formed, pretty much, very much like Rory in Sleepless. He was very much fully formed as well. I do like normal kind of romantic leads. I don't like the what's the guy's Jack Reacher. So he's a great character, don't get me wrong, but it's just like, we know that he's going to survive everything because he can do everything.
He is, yeah. And we can't always have Jack Reachers, because the world isn't just full of Jack Reachers. No. We certainly need that spectrum of characters, because then reading loses that you know, that sense of discovery.
Yes.
If we know a character is going to behave in a certain way, then it doesn't happen. Now I wonder, how can we do this? Because Esther does get to go out beyond the house. I wonder, could you share with us one moment when her eyes are opened to things, and how she sees things, as you say, in that very naive way? Is there anything that you could?
Oh, there's loads of funny bits.
Tell us one of the humorous ones.
She ends up in a B&B, so it's a room above a pub, and she's kind of thinking to herself, she wonders why everybody out there, as she calls it the out there, why they all have tiny kettles and they keep them in cupboards. Because I was thinking, well, if you just left your house and the first place you've got to is this B&B, you think, well, why does everyone have tiny kettles, and why do they keep them in the cupboards, and why are the mugs so small? You'd think that's just strange. Maybe there's some sort of kettle problem.
It's all part of a reduction in resources.
Yes. And she's watching the TV, and at some point a stupid advert comes on with a cartoon bread with a toast with a face, and she's guessing that's probably just made up, but she said, well, who knows, perhaps sentient bread is a thing out here. She has no idea. So yeah, I had real fun. I really loved doing all of those bits.
Yeah.
It's like it's a bit like Splash, isn't it? Like kind of those 80s films where you had, it's a mermaid in Splash, isn't it? When you have the person who's very much out of the water, in her case, and trying to deal with a world they don't understand.
And it did bring that humor in from what begins as a very dark claustrophobic, sinister feel to the story. There is that shift. Prior to going out there, much of her understanding is from films.
Yes.
And I wondered, for those films, were there any aspects from your own film watching that you wanted to bring in to the book, or did you just choose at random?
I think they're probably all films that I liked. I mean, it was a great time for films in the 80s and 90s, though some of them don't bear rewatching.
They were of that moment. Not going to now. No,
watch them again, because you suddenly notice all the things that you didn't notice when you were a kid watching them. And also the language is terrible. I remember watching the Goonies with my class, so they were 11 and 12, and it's a PG, so I was like, fine, it's PG, well, there's no problem. The language was appalling. I was like, I'm so sorry, guys. In the 80s, clearly we could all swear.
It's like shocking.
Because all the children, as soon as you put on a film with 11 and 12-year-olds and the teacher's there and somebody swears, it's oh yeah, guys, you've heard this before, don't worry about it. So yeah, I mean, they're all films that I loved. I think I made a reference to Pretty Woman. I think there's a Pretty Woman kind of transformation scene, and I just love them. I love the 80s and 90s films because they are, again, it's kind of pre-internet, isn't it? So they do now feel very vintage, but they also had great imagination and great fun, and cinema wasn't dominated by Marvel films.
Yeah.
So there was a breadth of stuff. And teenage films, you've got St. Elmo's Fire, and you've got Breakfast Club, and all of that sort of stuff happening. You don't get that quite so much now with cinema. You don't have that kind of, they felt like indie films almost.
Yeah. What was the one where Samantha from Sex and the City, she's
Mannequin.
That's it, mannequin. Yeah.
I loved Mannequin.
Awesome. Yeah.
I used to go that, and weirdly Crocodile Dundee I had a bit of an obsession with. Not quite sure why I was so obsessed with Crocodile Dundee. But I used to come home from school and my mum would let me watch, you know, like 15-20 minutes where I did my homework, and I would do this rotation like Mannequin, Splash, Crocodile Dundee,
Footloose as well.
Baby Boom.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And they're just brilliant films. They're just great fun. But if you're trying to work out what the modern world is like from them, that's where you fall down.
Yeah, because sadly it's not now, Louise. Time is not our friend at this point, and so if you don't mind, I would love to draw our session to a close by asking a little bit about, as we started off by talking about crime fiction writing in Wales, about Wales, and the Gold Crime Cymru Festival. Give us your thoughts, your impressions, your hopes.
So definitely one of the best things about being able to be within the crime fiction genre. So even though I'm very much off kilter and a little bit on the edge of psychological thriller, I get to be part of this amazing crime fiction world. And it is an amazing world. It's so warm and welcoming for people who write such horrendous stuff. It's just really great fun. And one of the greatest things is Crime Cymru, which is a collective of writers who are living in Wales or have a connection with Wales or are Welsh. And in particular, so it's Alice Hawkins and Matt Johnson who started up Crime Cymru, and they also had the amazing idea of having a Welsh crime fiction festival, which we don't have in Wales. There's a brilliant one in Newcastle, so I'm told. And
they do say.
They do say. And there is a brilliant one in Scotland, but Wales doesn't have one. So it's, hopefully we've done 2 brilliant years online with some amazing names like M.W. Craven and Mary Hannah and Mark Billingham and Claire McIntosh and all of these fantastic writers. And we're now bringing that to an in-person event now in April next year, which is going to be incredibly exciting in Aberystwyth, with a big focus on obviously the big name authors as well, but also bringing to people's attention the fantastic writing that Welsh crime fiction writers are producing now, including me, but also lots of other names, and also the Welsh language as well, which is really important. So it's a really I think it's a really exciting time to be a Welsh crime fiction writer. I would definitely not want to be in any other genre right now. I think it's great.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. If people want to find out more, there is a website. Is there not a Crime Cymru Festival website?
Gwyl is GWYL. Yeah. Gwyl Crime Fiction Festival, and there's a website. You can find out about the program. You can watch some of the previous panels on YouTube, the online stuff that we've done as well. Brilliant.
And seriously, if you are able to go to Wales next April 2023 for the festival, do, because Aberystwyth's just an amazing town to be in. It really is, and it promises to be an amazing event. But to round off, Louise, thank you so much for spending time with us here in the consultation. Thank you for sharing about your writing, the inspiration, your characters. We wish you every success with the Safe House, and as we always say, we do look forward to the next one. No pressure, but you know, there are authors that we like, and when we do, it's like, please come have some more. So I'm glad there's a next one on the way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm working on book 3 right now.
Fabulous. So thank you, and hope to see you soon. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
A pleasure. Bye for now.